Hey, what's good, everyone? Theory Fire here, and today we're doing Talking Theory. It's been a while since I've done one of these where I just generally talk about something that interests me. And today I wanted to talk about the problem with fighting game guides. And that's a pretty general statement, obviously. So there's look, there's a lot of things we can talk about here, right? We can talk about, does someone know enough to make a guide? What at what point in your ability level is it appropriate for you to start teaching other people? We could talk about, the gold rush of a new game and lots of people jumping on a new game, releasing tier lists and strategies and all that sort of stuff without having really any experience in the game itself because it's just new and just trying to cash grab off YouTube clicks. But today I want to talk about reference points and assumed knowledge. So this is the thing that interests me a lot, right? I've been doing this for a long time. Not to say that I'm any kind of authority on anything. I'm definitely not. I just have been doing it, and there are some observations I have with the problems that arise, right? And that I've just seen from the response of the audience and stuff. What do I mean by reference points and assumed knowledge? Say I'm doing a character guide, right? I'm going to say X character. This is X character's guide. And I say to you, this guy is a frame trap character. They're a frame trap character. Their whole thing is they want to frame trap you. When I go and then speak about those frame traps, or when I go and explain the character as a whole, am I sitting there and going, okay, what is an actual frame trap? Because you don't know who your audience is, right? You don't know. And you could put intermediate, beginner, and all that sort of stuff, but you're assuming that there is some sort of knowledge base. If I'm explaining a character, I'm assuming you know how the game works, and I'm telling you how that character works within the game, but I'm not telling you about the game. I'm assuming a lot of knowledge, and you actually don't really know where people's entry points are. And as I was saying, things like beginner, intermediate, those are really arbitrary definitions. They've changed massively over the last 10 years, right? So we look back at, 2008, you wouldn't really expect an average player to be doing safe jump option selects. Like, people just didn't do that as much. There were definitely people that did, but your average player didn't. They might have had like a better understanding of neutral, or different aspects of their game may have been more complete. But there were definitely certain things that weren't common knowledge. And now I speak to people that have just started that are doing like crazy complex option selects that I've never even heard of, right? So what is a beginner? Like, I might be able to beat that person, and I would consider myself an average player. So does that make them a beginner? But they know all this advanced stuff that I don't know. So it's a real big grey area. And I think this is a big issue because, a lot of people are entering fighting games, and we all know that fighting games have a tendency for a lackluster tutorial. And even when it is more complete, say like Unio and stuff like that, or even Guilty Gear, people don't use it for whatever reason. I mean, it's people were surprised by seeing entrance into this genre not using tutorial modes, but it's not surprising. When I get a game and it's like a multiplayer game that goes, do you want to do the tutorial mode? I'm like, fuck no, just like get me in the game and I'll figure it out as I go. But in fighting games, because you're playing 1v1, which is a bigger issue, you get waxed up and you're like, oh, this game makes no sense, fuck this game. Then you might go to a YouTube video and have someone explain it to you, and I think that's perfectly valid. But you also might get the person that's very experienced in fighting games. They might come into it and go watch a video to like figure out a character, see some stuff they might have missed, and then suddenly you're explaining what a frame trap is and they don't care anymore. Like, you risk alienating an audience because you don't know who the audience is. And yeah, that is a continual issue. And you get people doing more beginner focused stuff, you get people doing more intermediate focused stuff, but like I said, the entry points are all over the place. And you can't define that, and you have to accept it. I don't believe there's necessarily a solution to that. I mean, maybe it's just you link off to tertiary information and expect people to go watch another video. If you're referring to frame traps, maybe just have a link to a frame trap video explaining what they are. That's totally reasonable. The project I did a while back now with Mace, the Street Fighter's Guide to Guilty Gear. And I know some people are like, oh, he's just fucking, trying to pull from Street Fighter V's audience and whatever. which I guess in a certain way, like, inevitably happens, but it wasn't the purpose of it being called that and coming from that angle. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose was giving a context, giving a frame of reference, and assuming a bit of knowledge. I'll give you an example of where this really came in. And it's not just like going, Kai, he's like a Shoto, but he has Grinder. Like, that's whatever. Like, it's not interesting. But when we did a video on neutral, we didn't want to talk about neutral. So if you're explaining neutral to anyone, right, the first, like, someone that doesn't know fighting games, the first thing you're going to be like is, you got to know how long your buttons are, what buttons give you big damage, what buttons are quick, blah, blah, blah. Like, all of that sort of stuff. But we didn't want to do that because there is a billion guides for that. And they're all really good. Look at Juicebox Able just talk about neutral. It's amazing. It's like such a fantastic video. But we didn't want to just do that. Instead, what we wanted to do was highlight the differences between Guilty Gear neutral and Street Fighter neutral. And some Guilty Gear players really hated that we did that because they felt as if we were ignoring the core fundamentals of neutral. But we were assuming that if a Street Fighter player has come from Street Fighter and is trying to go into Guilty Gear, they're going to understand what button range is, spacing is, they're going to know to use quick buttons, close range, like all that really basic sort of stuff. Like, we just assumed you knew it. And we said it up front. We were like, we're just going to assume you know this sort of stuff, and we're going to talk more about when you jump as someone, you have like 20 different options. Pretty much every character does. So you're actually making a bit of a read every single time someone jumps. So a lot of it is tendency based, what works the best, what covers multiple options, yada, yada, yada. And that for me was a really important thing because it allowed us to focus way heavier on Guilty Gear than we would have. We would have just focused on fighting games, but now we're talking about Guilty Gear specifically with the context of what's different from Street Fighter to Guilty Gear. And that's not going to work for everything. Obviously, I'm not just going like, everyone should be doing this. Like, that's stupid. Like, obviously not. Some people just get into Guilty Gear without playing Street Fighter. But what we're doing is just making sure everyone knows what you need to know before you get into the video. We're expecting people to be adequate Street Fighter players, or at least have like some experience in fighting games. And that gives us the room to actually be able to talk about what we want to talk about, what interesting to us. And I think this issue is way more highlighted in the modern era of YouTube. Back before, or even like, I mean, it's not even the era of YouTube anymore, it's the era of Twitter 5-second videos and Discord tech in a channel that you're not invited to. But let's say it's the era of YouTube. Back in the day when I learned Balrog in Super Turbo, I went straight to the SRK wiki because that had complete information on there and references for all those pieces of information, you know? So if I was talking about like, if they were talking about tick throws, there was an article on tick throws that I could click through, read that, go back to the first one. And it was way less cumbersome. You know, there's a bigger issue of like editorializing oneself in fighting game guides, but then when you do that, do you lose personality, and then is that less connecting with an audience? All that sort of like fucking nonsense. It's not interesting to talk about. Like that's a big thing that people consider now. When it was all written down, none of this was a big issue. Like, I could just click off, read like one paragraph and have something explained to me, rather than watching a 10-minute video where half of it is like irrelevant to the point. There are so many problems that come with video as a format, and just the way that we display information now. Even if we had those videos in the format of, say, a Wikipedia, like the SRK wiki, it would be way easier to actually track all that information. Like, what do I need to know before I get into this? And do you expect everyone to watch a guide on what tech is, what neutral is, what an anti-air is? Like, do you expect that, or do you just assume it? And it's a bigger question to ask. And maybe it's a case you just treat everyone like intermediate and go, hey, you need to figure out some cool stuff for yourself. Like, if you get anti-ed and you don't have the logic to go, I shouldn't do that again, or I should maybe do that less frequently, then maybe it's just like, hey, this is a wrap. Like, you know, you do you. But I don't know. It's a bigger question, and it's up to everyone that makes is trying to make sort of informative content, air quotes, to make that decision. Who are you actually aiming any of this stuff at? Are you going to take steps to explain stuff that is within the video that isn't the focal point? All right, short video, but hopefully there's some talking point in there for people to reflect a little bit, because I'm doing it constantly, trying to figure out where I sit in all of this. So take it easy. Thanks for listening.